floor is open. We've got about 20 odd minutes. We've got about 20 odd minutes, so we will open the floor. We've seen how good the speakers have been today, precise and limited to time, so all of you must follow that example. Ask sharp, brief questions so that we can get as many from the audience as possible. There's a microphone there.
What time is it? Good afternoon. My name is Natullah Khan. I'm the group president of Cosmos Group, and my foundation, Cosmos Foundation, I'm very happy to know that we have a very good collaboration with ISAS, the National University of Singapore, for many, many years. And I congratulate the Bangladesh Mission in Singapore and Singapore Business Federation and other enterprises who have organized this very, very informative, educative session on Bangladesh. In fact, some of these figures and numbers that have been quoted, I think these are mind-boggling, even as a Bangladeshi, to absorb and to internalize these numbers. And the growth of Bangladesh is really phenomenal. But my question here is that of all the eloquent speakers that have been here, if you had, any one of you could answer that question, if you had one single issue on governance issue that you would like to say that would improve the governance in Bangladesh, what would that be? And any one of you could answer that question. Thank you.
We could take 3 questions from the floor, but you can ask the question.
Quickly to Professor Palit for number 1. You spoke about FTAs, and you specifically mentioned India, China, and Singapore. You were talking about them as well. Let me tell you that with India and China, though we have 0% duty, and we can actually export garments, the export figures have been absolutely dipping. With India, it has gone up a little. From 300 million, we've gone up to 900, and with China, it's still at a 300 something. So it's not rising because of NTBs. Lots of non-tariff barriers which basically bar us from exporting to these countries. So I'm not very hopeful about what's going to happen. And we do import a lot of woven fabric from China anyway. You had a reference to RCEP in World Economic Forum, where our Honorable Foreign Secretary was also there. The Prime Minister actually expressed a willingness and an intent to join the RCEP. So I think that's fine. You spoke about fast fashion. But you know, it is also, it poses a lot of risk. And I just want you to think about it to climate positive. And you know, circular economy is something that we are thinking of and recycles. So I think we have to also rethink about what we are doing. Is fast fashion really fast? For the Honorable Foreign Secretary, if he's still in the audience, just one thing though, since he's left. Okay, for Iftekhar to also think about it. Since 2027, we finish with EBA. Could Bangladesh government go for an extended EBA negotiation?
Is there anyone else?
Yeah. Good afternoon. It's very happy to be attending this forum today, and I learned it's been a very informative session. One question I have is, you know, all the data that has been quoted in investments, you know, in infrastructure, the growth figures, you know, and so forth. My question is, what are the sources of these numbers? And you know, for example, we get different figures from, you know, ADB, government, you know, and then, you know, you get growth projections, you know, from various, you know, sources. So that's the question. Thank you.
Maybe we just want to start on some of the issues.
Thank you, Dr. Huq. I agree with you on the NTBs. I think NTBs are a fundamental barrier to not just countering the benefits of market access, but also generally for expansion of trade. But this is what FTA negotiations can accommodate. Because by and large, most FTAs signed across the world have specific chapters on SPS and TBTs. So it is possible to address the existing entities through the scope of these chapters. Unfortunately, however, this is a subject which in ASEAN FTA negotiations has been relatively neglected. So I think it's important to sense one advantage that Bangladesh has. Bangladesh has not been a part of FTA negotiations by and large, but Bangladesh has had the advantage of observing what is going on with FTAs around it, including in the region. And that experience is substantial because today the RCEP is actually to an extent suffering because it continues to run with a weak SPS chapter. And there are countries which would, and without naming, there are countries which would insist on maintaining weak SPS chapters. So that's a challenge which I alluded to right at the beginning, that the FTA negotiating experience is probably important to gather at that level. I'm glad that you mentioned about RCEP. I think RCEP is a low ambition mega FTA, one of the lowest. The potential to become the largest FTA in the world, and I would naturally think that a number of countries which are in the region, including Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, should be natural lock-ons to the RCEP. The third point on circular economy, can I take your point? But you know, the greater point that I'm trying to address in this regard is that you alluded to this very important challenge of diversifying. I think the challenge is coming on faster than anticipated, because of the structural changes in the organization of production. Because then it's not just a question of diversifying, but diversifying where. I think that's where, to a very large extent, traditional forms of manufacturing today are encountering challenges which were probably not visualized even 5 years ago. So for many countries, it's a huge issue.
Yeah, there are three quick points. One, to Nat, your question as to what should be the single most, if there is to be one area in which to focus, I would have thought from the conversations today, you see, normally what you would want is a sweeping reforms across the board, which is not feasible. Now there is something called the Nash equilibrium in mathematics. I mean, you don't go for the highest, you go for the next possible feasible thing. I mean, this is from Beautiful Mind, etc. So the next possible thing would be strengthening of institutions, I should think. I mean, Aziz made a reference to the institutions. Yes, institutions in Bangladesh are doing very well. There are certain perceptible gaps on the part of the partners, and these are in broadly three areas. One is in the legal framework, parliamentary committees, etc., election commissions, these needs to be strengthened. Secondly, earlier this morning I had a conversation with someone on the regulatory mechanisms. These need to be strengthened. And thirdly, the simple law and order mechanisms. So institution building would have to be emphasized, and that should be, to my mind, the core focus. Secondly, to your question about whether, I mean, everybody has his own ways of deriving, but I would urge you to consider that it's not the numbers that are important, but the tendencies that the directions that the numbers represent. Rubana, to your question of, okay, very important question, whether EBA extension is possible. Yeah, extension is possible by the EU. Now, I was in the first negotiations when we went with it over. EU is a very complex organization. 28 countries. It's not just the 28 countries. They are well operating from beneath, but it's the Commission and Foreign Secretary will tell me out. It is possible. It is doable, but it will take a huge amount of diplomatic deftness on our parts, and which with people like Shoaib in control, I'm absolutely sure we have the capacity, but we will have to engage ourselves very seriously on this subject.
No, not this. Yeah. Confused audience. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. The first question of governance and transparency and other things is again, it's a matter of perception, and I think you are very well placed to improve the perception about Bangladesh. From what Bangladesh suffers from, not so much as, I think that we have very good institutions, as I have stated. I think what we suffer from is perception. The whole world The catch situation today is, what do you have in the media? What do the media speak about you? People are believers of media, people are believers of the social media as well, and the newspapers. So I personally give it back to you that as the president of the Cosmos Group, you have some work to do over there. Data. Now, this is the world of metadata, and we are still wondering about whether the data are right or wrong. I think the number of Bangladesh has a mobile trend. About 70% people have access to internet and telephony. So data are instantly available, and the central bank is fully digitalized. The customs is fully digitalized. The Export Promotion Bureau is digitalized. I'm sure BGMEA with their people are also. So the data are easy to acquire at this point in time. I think the world has never seen a situation where you can get data. Votings can also almost be done through the mobile phone. So people are really talking about metadata. We are getting concerned about the amount of data people have about us. So I don't think that data is a concern if the government and the people want data to be correct.
Thank you. The Foreign Secretary is back in the audience. I mean, if I may take the liberty of transmitting a question that was posed to you. No, essentially, Dr. Huq wanted to know whether we can do with the EU, whether Bangladesh is prepared to. I want to add something more broadly to it. Generally, what is the state of affairs in terms of in Dhaka? Is it more open for free trade negotiations? Would be interested in doing one with Singapore or ASEAN or the RCEP? So where is the needle in Dhaka on free trade? Because South Asia has generally been a difficult place for free trade.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. What I'll do is give you an impression as to where the FTA negotiation in generally evolving, Bangladesh versus others, and then try and share with you how we are looking at European Union and also the RCEP. In general, Bangladesh was, here I'm not speaking as a foreign secretary, as someone, as a participant. Bangladesh has been a little behind in FTA negotiations, and there were reasons. As an LDC, we have been getting whatever we needed, and there wasn't a desire to further open up and go into the negotiations. But we realized about 2-3 years back that the going will be difficult if we don't go into the negotiation. First, we opened up FTA negotiation with Sri Lanka. And then eventually with Sri Lanka, we thought instead of looking at FTA, let's look at comprehensive economic cooperation. So we moved into that, and that's progressing pretty well. Then we looked at Turkey, the other country. In fact, Turkey volunteered and proposed negotiations, which is fairly in an advanced stage. Recently, we are looking at the feasibility study for FTA with China. So these are the broad 3 countries. I have my own reservations about giving the whole FTA negotiations or economic cooperation negotiations to the Tariff Commission. I think Tariff Commission, some or other, because of the mandate and orientation, they only look at tariff, which is just opposite to what Dr. Palit has been saying. We have to look at a bigger picture. I think some of the civil servants often fail to look at the bigger picture. So in the Foreign Office, we have been trying to lead with a little bit of a difficulties, but we see how it grows. On the RCP, we have looked at our possibilities of Bangladesh joining the RCEP, and RCEP, they have their own difficulties. It was supposed to be completed this year because of a number of countries' reluctance to open up, especially when the India wanted their skilled people and service people to be able to move into that space. There wasn't a taker. So that I think will slow down the process. But Bangladesh has been trying to get into not only an RCEP but also in the TPP. When the TPP was evolving, we were one of the countries volunteered. I have pursued them, but I think they did not take Bangladesh very seriously. It may be very frank in terms of economic might. Possibly they would now. On the European Union, in fact, our economic cooperation with the European Union has been splendid. I think they have really provided a huge stimulus to Bangladesh to grow its economy, and that's where it is. Now, looking at post LDC period, we have already started discussing with them. Bangladesh will not be entitled for GSP Plus because the quantity of trade takes place between the 28 countries and Bangladesh is much higher than for a country to go into GSP Plus. So what we are now looking at is a new arrangement, a different kind of an arrangement for Bangladesh. How that different kind of an arrangement will look like and whether the parliament will agree to that, we don't know. But we have officially proposed them, so let's look at a more broader economic and political cooperation. They are more interested to include the political aspect of the economy into the discussions. And where we are, now that the new parliament and the commission is in place, we'll see how it evolves. I think in 2 months' time in Dhaka, there will be a negotiations centering around, we are not calling it a GSP++, we are calling it a comprehensive economic cooperation between Bangladesh and European Union. So on this, certainly there are hopes, I think. I think those countries also take Bangladesh pretty seriously nowadays because they know there are huge potentials. On the issue of capacity of the government, I think I have a mixed feeling after serving for 33 years and serving under somebody, Dr. Iftekhar Chowdhury and others, legends of the time on the economic issues. I think we need huge capacity building to be able to sit in the negotiation table and talk across and make a sense of it. There we have a huge gap. Thank you, sir.
I think we have time for just maybe one round of questions, then we'll close it here. Rani, Dr. Palit.
My question is about debt sustainability and loans in Bangladesh. So Bangladesh has been looking to diversify its infrastructure investments, lending from abroad, looking to, Japan was mentioned as well as the EU. And yet, China is still one of its largest funders, and Bangladesh is one of the largest destinations of Chinese funding, by some estimates as much as $30 to $40 billion. So my question is, how is Bangladesh going to avoid the kind of scenario we're currently seeing in Pakistan, of high debt owed to China and perhaps even a debt trap scenario? Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anyone else in the audience? Yes, sir. Please make it brief. Yeah, we can go to the microphone.
Yeah, my name is Asad Mamun. I'm the General Secretary of Bangladesh Business Chapter. My question to Ms. Rubana Huq about Bangladesh garments. I just wanted to know that after 10 years or 15 years, do you think the Bangladesh garments will be still competitive in the world market? Because currently what I understand that Bangladesh is getting incentive from the government when they export. Secondly, the cheap manpower, which is the workforce, which is make the garments more profitable. And third, not get enough price from the international market. So there are other markets like Vietnam, Cambodia also coming. So how you think, and there is another question is that Bangladesh oven sector is not developed. Just now you told in your speech that oven market, we are still depending on China. You import a lot of fabrics from China to develop. We are just doing swing in Bangladesh. So how you can solve this issue future? Thanks.
Thank you. I had a question, so I'm taking the last question, and which is really, we heard a bit on the digital side from Dr. Huq, but maybe the Foreign Secretary can tell us, what is the larger digital strategy for the government today? What are the plans for the next 5 years? So I
respond to the debt trap?
And both these, I'll give you the last word, so I'll just go around the panel then. I think it'll be fitting that you speak last, and because I think your initial presentation as well as interventions have been so valuable. So we'll go from left. Mr. Khan, you want to add anything, or at this point, your final thoughts?
Yes, please. About the debt sustainability, thank you very much for that question, because that has become quite since the Sri Lankan Hambantota port, that has been something that at least according to the Chinese, the Europeans and the Americans have been talking about the debt trap. I personally feel that debt is necessary for countries to develop and to develop at a faster pace. The quality of the debt, the tenor of the debt, the interest of the debt is perhaps more important, and how that debt is implemented is perhaps more important than the requirement of debt itself is absolutely necessary. The interest rates and other things are the markers of modern world. Debt is the way you can grow. We have a $1 billion debt book summit itself, so debt is something that I am always concerned about. But if you see the debt sustainability of Bangladesh, the current, I think it is about 25% of the GDP that we have as a debt. And that's quite a sustainable debt. And the investments that are being done in Bangladesh, each one of them are in infrastructure. The Sri Lankan and other aspects that we often think about, we do not consider the population versus the requirement of the infrastructure. In Bangladesh, it is being invested for, say, for example, the Matarbari project, which I mentioned, or the Paira port project, which I mentioned, or the Podda bridge, metro rail. These are infrastructures that would enhance the GDP very substantially. So I don't see that GDP to debt ratio would perhaps change in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would sort of endorse everything that Aziz has said with regard to debt sustainability. Would also like to flag the point that in the first phase of development of Bangladesh, when Bangladesh was a major aid recipient, this matter was also raised. There was a question of whether, how the other half dies, etc. Whole idea, it was almost a neo-Marxist kind of criticism of Bangladesh's aid recipiency, that this might deepen dependency and create debt burdens. Amortization, which is the returning of debts, for Bangladesh has not been a problem in the past, and we managed quite well. This is a significant new area, and of course Foreign Secretary will react to it. But let me just tell you that I had my brief conversations with the former finance minister. He did not seem worried about it, as was not the Pakistan finance minister, but that's another matter. But Mr. Muhammed had said that it is manageable. It is manageable by the Bangladesh system, and Shoaib will probably react to it in a bigger way.
Answer the quick question. So for you, I have a couple of things to say. One, Bangladesh could look at floor pricing. We could control that if we wanted to. Capacity curtailing. We have overcapacity right now, so we need to optimize our factories actually and our products. Number three is we are actually encouraging a lot of FDIs. So we have 100 economic zones. So we want people to basically come and set up backward linkage. Most importantly, I think it's an era of co-opetition. It's not an era of competition, it's collaboration. So it's co-opetition is the new word, and I think that makes sense. So that's why we're talking about ASEAN +1, we're talking about FTAs, because you have to collaborate, otherwise you can't survive. And also on the cheapest, I think we should be termed now as most competitive instead of cheapest. I don't kind of averse to the word cheap. We are the kind of appeal that we can have for the outside world is number one. It's consumers are more conscious now. So that's why Bangladesh is going to survive, because apparel is your second skin. And we can appeal to the world that, we are the most humane, maximum female empowerment. We have most green, we are most compliant, and we are most competitive. So I think with these three messages, Bangladesh can go forward with a spirit of co-opetition and, of course, integration as much as possible. Thank you.
Very quickly, Bangladesh's services trade with the rest of the world reflects another category which is not much talked about, and that is the importance of a category called other commercial services. This is a broad category, but my sense is if one goes deep into it, what we would see is that Bangladesh increasingly beginning to gain proficiency in the global services of what we typically define as data-intensive services. And that's where, again, I think the point that I alluded to earlier, the point that Professor Mohan has mentioned as well. digital connectivity backed by domestic capabilities in data-intensive services can create the possibility that Bangladesh can actually become an excellent data intermediary hub. Because again, the geography is vital. I think that's a point which can be a selling point for Bangladesh when it enters FTA negotiations.
Sorry for taking the floor. Once again, since the issue of debt trap came in, and I thought we need to clarify our position. In fact, the Prime Minister in the Dalian, faced with these questions, said that we are not worried. The reason being that when we borrow, there are three criteria that she follows. One is that whether return would go to the people or not, whether the debt is taken for the people's interest or not. So that means it creates new services and facilities for the people. Number two, what is that return that you are talking about? Third is the negotiation itself. Let me give you an example. What is the debt GDP ratio for Bangladesh? 14.3. What is of Sri Lanka? 66%. What is of India? 20%. What is of Pakistan? 34%. So we are far behind in terms of debt GDP ratio, and that's why it's not of our concern, number one. Number two, our debt, if you look at the characteristics of debt, and I had the privilege of sitting some of the negotiations, we have been very tough. We have been very clear as to what creates a trap and what doesn't. The other thing is, in fact, there's a view that we possibly should have borrowed a little more in the past to be able to create more wealth, and which we did not. Now the question that I asked myself, why we didn't? Because nobody was interested to give money to Bangladesh. Let's be very frank. I mean, the market wasn't interested, the government wasn't interested, because everybody thought that Bangladesh at the end, being a case study and a bottom, being a basket, would not be able to repay. Bangladesh is the only country which has never defaulted on any debt, whether the government or the private. Having said this, we are very careful on possibilities of debt burden on us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think that was really... It's my pleasant duty to bring this, I think, a very informative panel discussion to a close this morning. I mean, there are days ahead for other events that are going to be followed. But for now, I just want to say special thanks to the Foreign Secretary for being here. I want to thank the High Commissioner for helping us do this, for Singapore Business Federation, as well as Enterprise Singapore for letting us do this. I also want to thank Ambassador Derek Lowe, High Commissioner Derek Lowe, who is non-resident High Commissioner in Dhaka. Thank you for joining us. So we're really thrilled at the response. And on behalf of the ISAS, I mean, what I would like to say is, this is just the beginning of, shall we say, of a beautiful relationship, if you like, that we would like to do more on Bangladesh in the days ahead through multiple dimensions. One is the business aspect we've seen today. We have other ideas in terms of Bangladesh's contribution to international peace and security, Bangladesh's role in regional integration. So we see an exciting journey for us. I mean, while Bangladesh is on an exciting journey on the economic side, we on ISAS, as a Singapore institution mandated with the study of contemporary South Asia, we are quite excited about making Bangladesh very central to our study, our activity in the days ahead. So thank you. Please join me in appreciating these four speakers here this morning. We'll have the last word.
Thank you, Professor Mohan and distinguished speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's seminar. On behalf of the organizers, I thank all of you for your participation. For those of you who have signed up for the afternoon session, please register for the session during the lunch reception. The afternoon session will start at 2 p.m. in this room. We will now adjourn for a networking lunch outside the seminar room. Thank you.